This week in K-12, we're coming up on spring, and we're coming up on budgeting season, so getting all our ducks in a row with school boards and administrators, and really trying to hammer out what FY13 is going to look like. And most of the news that we're hearing from administrators and folks in the know, people at the state and federal and international levels, the situation is not positive. And it hasn't been positive for a few years now, but this year, in particular, is yet another year where there is no stimulus money. There are limited funds coming pretty much from any source. We're seeing some economic recovery worldwide. We're seeing economies begin to move along and come back from the brink. China and India have been doing fine all along, but the rest of us have been struggling for a number of years now. We're seeing jobs reports improving, certainly seeing some economic indicators heading upwards for the first time consistently. Stock market's doing great. The rich continue to get richer, and yet in the classroom we know that really there's not much trickle down happening, and just as classrooms tend to run a year or two behind the technology world in terms of their technology implementations, so too are they running behind in terms of economics. CNN featured an article this week noting that good news has certainly not made its way to most K-12 districts, and I would certainly agree with that. I mean, my own district is facing some significant cuts, another round this year of significant cuts, and actually, as the CNN article notes, there's 57% of districts in this country that are expecting to increase class sizes. About half of them are planning to delay various projects and improvements, cuts in technology. 30% are going to be eliminating summer school and other remedial tasks. As one superintendent notes, the biggest problem is that there were already some quite significant cuts generally made across the board last year in most districts, and one could call that sort of a shaking out and readjusting for new economic conditions and changes in population sizes and whatnot. Adjusting to a new reality, so to speak. But this year, now, if you're going to cut deeper, where do you go for your cuts? And as usual, the arts, technology are being targeted. It's also a lot of districts that the sports tend to get cut a little later on. Certainly going to be digging in there. We have districts reporting that they will be charging for preschool if they haven't before. Many districts already are. The other problem, of course, that districts are facing, most of their revenue comes either from state aid, much of which has dried up a bit. Some get, they'll get certainly reimbursements from federal programs and grants, but most of their revenue comes from taxes, property taxes. And as the housing situation continues to sort of spiral downwards outside of major cities and big population centers are seeing some housing recovery, tax revenues are way down. And that is now being felt perhaps in even more significant ways because there's sort of a year's delay in those changes happening at schools. So it's sort of a dismal situation, and this is not something that is easily solved. It is certainly time for districts to be thinking if they'd like to maintain as many programs as possible, want to continue maintaining quality instruction. Districts need to focus on teaching practices and on being able to differentiate instruction in large classes, ways to effectively use the technology that they already have, ways to look at thin client solutions, look at bring your own device. So it's certainly it's not just about making sure that technology stays in schools, but really it's about being able to leverage technology among many other things as tools for addressing these ongoing issues. So it's not an insignificant problem. It is one that I would love to believe that technology has a chance of helping, but we will see how FY13 plays out. Our next story, we've got a couple stories out of The Guardian, and interesting look at how French parents and their students are actually boycotting homework. And in France, interestingly, and perhaps we'll have to talk about this a bit on Review Ed later, so that my colleagues in France can weigh in. But in France there are some interesting perspectives on homework, and in fact there are laws on the books about homework in primary school. In fact, it's outright banned in primary schools. But yet, many teachers still believe that there is value in having students do some exercises, at least reinforce, and I happen to be one of them. That reinforcing skills learned during the day at home, I think that makes sense. The parents groups who are boycotting homework and promoting this boycott and looking for legislation around this, actually bring up some very good points, though. And the first is that not all parents have the wherewithal, the ability, or the time to help their students, and homework very often does require some help and some assistance, and it's a useful tool for parental involvement. But when parents don't have a means of doing that, then those students are not getting the benefits of homework. Secondly, they point out that oftentimes homework stinks, and I couldn't agree with this more. Homework often is busy work, and teachers have a tendency to copy some worksheets out of the materials that came with the textbook and send it home and call that homework. And certainly that I rail against with my own kids, and we're seeing some changes there with progressive teachers and progressive schools. But by and large, a lot of homework tends to just be kill and drill, busy work, and so they make a good point there. What's the point of that? The final point that they're making is that really this is sort of shoving off the job of teaching to parents, and I don't know if I fully agree with that. I mean, I think the parents need to have a role in education, but the idea that if there is going to be homework, whether you believe in that or not, there's going to be homework that needs to have high value and that needs to directly contribute to student achievement. That is important, an important consideration. So, the question is, what do you do from there? Because there's a conflicting article that comes out of The Guardian as well that says, students in the UK were studied for some time and found that those students who did up to a couple hours of homework a night generally had higher levels of achievement. Now, I would, and the study controlled for socioeconomic status, so they were able to say, that those students they use their economic status as and social class as a covariate, so they're able to say that it's not just poor students who are not achieving as well, but I don't think the study simply can't account for student motivation. So those students who are willing to put in 2, 3, 4 hours of homework a night, they're also the highly motivated students, and they aren't necessarily the very smartest, but they're highly motivated, and chances are they're going to do better in school. A student who spends 30 minutes a night or doesn't do homework because he doesn't want to, no matter how bright he is, he's probably not going to want to do very well in school either. So I have some issues with the study itself. I have issues with the methodology and the findings. I think it sends the wrong message that homework is good, more homework, more homework. What we need to take away from this, I think, is that homework can have a lot of value, and students should be reinforcing. But we need to make sure that there are ways to motivate students to do that. And if that comes through a flipped classroom, if that comes through video resources, we heard from Mentor Mob today, and really, what better way to give students really useful things to do at home than create a playlist of videos and resources that they can work through and review. There's Khan Academy that has now some assessments built in. There are online simulations. There's a lot of things that can be done here that can make homework useful. Now, again, as pointed out in the article, there is a digital divide. Not all students have access to the right resources at home to be able to access a video lecture or access a homework helpline, maybe online tutoring, study groups online, and that is a significant issue. And again, it makes the case for ubiquitous broadband and inexpensive broadband, and really for one-to-one, even if that one-to-one is done with really inexpensive devices. What you need is if you're thinking Kindle Fire, for example, or you're thinking there's so much focus on the iPad or on Ultrabooks, very fairly expensive technologies, when in fact really inexpensive technologies will get students access to a lot of online resources with fairly minimal needs for basic broadband. So just a lot of sort of homework considerations and interesting perspectives, but the takeaway message: if you're going to do homework, better make it relevant and interesting, and make sure that all of your students can access it. If they can't, you'd have alternatives. Another thing we'll talk about further on Review Ed from the business perspective, but we'll talk about Blackboard's acquisition of Moodlerooms. A lot of K-12 schools have no real need or use for Blackboard, but they certainly do have a use for Moodle, and it's been adopted quite widely among many K-12 educators and schools, largely because it's very inexpensive. Many choose Moodlerooms. It's quite a large provider at the K-12 level. So Moodlerooms has now been acquired by the largest higher ed learning management system company. And what does that mean? Well, according to the folks at Moodlerooms, it means nothing. It means that open source is going to be pushed forward farther, faster, funded better, and that may be the case. I hope it is. I wrote on this over on ZDNet, and I think, so far we've seen some pretty strong commitments out of both Blackboard and out of Moodlerooms to stay the course and continue funding Moodle, continue funding development, and see how things can push forward. But it's obviously a consideration for those people who are really committed to Moodle and to its use in the classroom, and who are using Moodlerooms as their hosting provider. So where does this leave the state of Moodle? There's a lot that remains to be seen, but I certainly think that as we end this year and come into the fall, I'm sure we'll see some sort of fallout from this. For right now, according to both companies, if you use Moodlerooms, you will have no problems, and it will be transparent. Perhaps things will even improve. Blackboard is extremely well funded, and I expect that Moodlerooms will also be a beneficiary of that. So hopefully, new features and innovations will become available to Moodlerooms users. Perhaps it wouldn't be if you were using another Moodle provider or hosting it yourself. Already, Moodlerooms has a fair number of value-added services for people who want to use Moodle. So, perhaps this will be a very positive thing, but it certainly should be on the radar of K-12 educators. A couple other quick stories. There's a feature over on eSchool News talking about, and it's actually in a number of other sources as well, the ACLU sued a school district and over the use of content filtering. All school districts use content filtering, of course. They're using it on many levels and for many reasons. It's required if you'd like to get E-rate reimbursements here in the States. And I think there's not many parents or even civil libertarians who would object to having some of the junk of the internet filtered from fifth grade computers. So the ACLU stepped in, though, in one particular Midwestern school district, began doing differential filtering, so filtering in ways that they felt was discriminatory, and I agree. What they did was any sites that were related to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues, AIDS education, those were all classified as sexuality sites and sexual sites, and were therefore blocked due to their policies. However, sites that we're talking about religion or about things that had a negative view towards LGBT issues, they were classified as religious sites, which of course were wide open. So that's the piece of discrimination, and it's I think what this is and they successfully won this lawsuit. They ended up settling the lawsuit, in fact, and the district attorney. The attorney for the school district maintains that they could have prevailed, but that it would have been too expensive to do so, and so it made more sense to settle. The terms of settlement are actually, fairly steep. They're going to be monitored for 18 months. They're paying, I think $125,000 in legal fees and other costs and compensation. Not an insignificant settlement, but the message is that as public schools, we need to be very thoughtful about the sorts of content filtering that we do. Is it for the sake of meeting our federal requirements and keeping students safe and away from things that are obviously really inappropriate. And how do we define inappropriate? It's a slippery slope. And we talked last week on C12 about community standards and about local control of education. This is certainly a place where local control can perhaps be it can certainly result in some challenges and in students finding that they can't get the information and resources that they need. Suicide rates are very high, and bullying rates are very, very high among lesbian and gay transgender students. So the need to find resources, to find community, to find things that are relatively positive and not feel even further stigmatized, it's pretty important. And so when districts step in and sort of impose that degree of morality, it obviously it creates challenges for the students, but it certainly will create potentially some legal issues for the district. So we always want to be thoughtful about those content policies, as we well know. Final story of the week. There was a report on the Educated Teacher, the Educated Reporter, excuse me, about the Bully documentary. And, what the upshot of the article was that this film Bully really can't capture the extent, the pervasiveness of bullying in schools. It's as I say, it's too complex for the multiplex, and I agree, because there are such subtle forms of bullying that take place. There are such subtle forms of just negativity that make kids not want to go to school. Kids don't want to go to school as it is, let alone go to a place where they feel invaded, where they feel like it's hostile, where they feel like they're not accepted. And we can't make every kid accept each other, but it certainly does suggest the need for schools in this country, districts in this country are adopting bullying policies. There's been some very high-profile deaths and suicides as a result of bullying. So there's lots of moves to improve the climate. Most of that improvement, though, is kind of coming in the form of new policies. Don't bully people. And so having something that's actually far more effective, things that are looking at improving school culture, improving school climate, true zero tolerance, and not turning a blind eye, which happens all too often. And in fact, teachers, unfortunately, often contribute to a climate of that as well, and not necessarily through any intention, but through a lack of sensitivity. And I'd hate to think we need to go back to 1980s sensitivity-style training, but certainly some thought needs to be put into the way that districts and schools improve climate and overall make things safe and really positive for students. It also goes back to the idea of making learning really engaging, so students want to be there to learn and are really actively engaged in their learning and not actively engaged in torturing each other, which is going to happen because kids do that sort of thing and shouldn't, but do. That being said, though, there's a lot to be said for what districts can do, what teachers can do, and parents can do to make a very positive climate. So, very interesting article on the Educated Reporter.